Hey friends, welcome back to the Evil Essence podcast. We apparently forgot to record an intro because we are still brand new at this. And since my brother lives kind of far away from me, I figured I would just do it on my own. So here we are, Michelle Mishcon Stevens and John Stevens. This is going to be part 2. So stick around, things are about to get pretty wild. And thanks for listening if you are. So anyway, back to the night of August 15th, which was a Monday. After Sam failed to get Austin to come back after leaving the restaurant, Austin continued walking and ran into his friend Daniel. And he actually talked about that in an interview he did with Dr. Phil because Dr. Phil's just involved always.
Oh, Dr. Phil knows what he's doing. He's the best doctor ever.
Totally. I'm pretty sure he's like a chiropractor whose license is not even renewed.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I'm sure he can help with that. So yeah, in that interview, Austin said all the lights were out and he ran into a dark figure on the street that he thought was evil.
Right.
This person was Daniel, so just a friend of Austin's cousin from childhood. But when Daniel spoke, Austin recognized his voice and became even more scared. So he sprinted away from Daniel, screaming. And this is when he veered off course from his, he was meaning to go to his dad's house, and instead he made a left turn around the corner. He then saw a white light coming from a garage. Now, Austin says that he ran up to the home on Kokomo Lane to ask for help in getting home because he saw the light.
Yeah.
Well, he was afraid of the dark and perceived this lighted garage to be a place where he'd be safe.
Oh, okay. So he didn't... He was scared of his friend Daniel?
Exactly.
He didn't...
He was, as we discussed before, going through it mentally.
I mean, obviously, yeah.
I also read, I didn't write it down because I didn't feel it was that important, but now it's kind of coming up.
Right.
Apparently he had some bad blood with Daniel. I think it was just over, a silly childhood thing.
But they were friends, though,
Well, it was a friend of his cousin from childhood.
Okay,
so he was just kind of around, and maybe Austin was like,
so this wasn't one of his friends that he was hanging out with earlier on in
this is just another
story.
Random guy after he left.
Oh, okay.
So he doesn't even come back up again. But yeah, that's what he says, and we don't really know because he's the only one who's able to tell the story because he murdered Michelle and John. So
yeah.
From Austin's story, he said that when he ran up screaming, a woman was there in the garage and she started screaming too. Remember that Michelle's neighbor, Jeff Fisher, witnessed bits and pieces of the ordeal, and he said that Austin was smashing up Michelle's car in the driveway and screaming animalistically when she came out to see what the commotion was.
It's crazy how these two stories come together, because to her, at first sight, it's a crazy man that she's immediately getting defensive for, and then, but his side of it, he's just, he's a troubled guy that's in need of some serious help in that moment. And it's
people
crazy
in
how...
his family have not been giving it
No,
to him.
yeah, I'm not saying it was up to Michelle to help him.
We don't know exactly what happened, obviously, but I'm assuming when she came out and saw this, fucking teenager smashing her car, she probably was like, what the hell, right?
Yeah, she didn't know he was just totally messed up. She was just thinking, this guy is, I'm immediately trying to defend myself against this crazy guy.
Yeah. If I heard someone smashing my car outside right now, I'd go out there and be like, what the hell are you doing?
And making animalistic noises. I'd immediately be in defense mode with, probably a weapon. Maybe this guitar on the ground.
Especially in Florida. God damn, I wish they had a weapon. That would have been so much better. Or, she probably didn't think she needed a weapon at that point, because, But anyways, she probably thought that she was just going to have to, call this kid's parents, and be like, hey, can you pay for the damage your fucking kid did?
Yeah.
But instead, she got brutally attacked. So, if you remember from Jeff's lucid account of events, from the small portion that he saw, Austin rushed Michelle and just threw her to the hard concrete floor before anything could happen. We also learned that he did this so hard that he partially scalped her. She could have been dead or unconscious and dying at this point after the first blow, but her official cause of death was blunt force trauma, so we can only hope she was not alive during the torment that happened after that.
Yeah, at that point, the best cause of death would have been the initial blow.
Exactly. It's horrible either way, but From Austin's statement, he said that he thought Michelle was a witch because she was screaming, apparently, at him, which I would be screaming too, so...
So she was screaming because he was screaming, but he thought that she was screaming because she was a witch.
Yeah, exactly, yes. I mean, if you remember, like, he was thinking that he was walking on all fours, he was like a dog.
He was
He was walking on all fours, he was thinking that he was a dog. So, his brain is gone. So Austin said he thought Michelle was going to harm him, and he had a brief memory of picking up a weapon, which he thought was a machete, and stabbing Michelle, then proceeding to bite her. After he had done this, he just roamed around the garage, and he actually found a bottle of alcohol in the garage, and remember, he's doing his purity thing, so this is fucking weird.
Yeah.
But he found this bottle of alcohol, which he started drinking, but this time it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't cooking oil, like last time, if you remember, he made himself a little cooking oil.
It was car oil.
It was a cleaning product with bleach in it, and he actually drank it.
So that probably further messed him up?
Yes, that was the main source of his injuries, in fact, when he gets to hospital. So he also remembers briefly seeing a guy in the doorway who he thought he also stabbed, and a dog, so that was probably John or Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been the attack with the guy.
He said a guy, so either Jeff or John.
Jeff is the neighbor, right?
Yes, exactly. So he didn't remember anything else after that until he was in the hospital. So we know from Jeff's account, the neighbor, that when he ran up to help Michelle, Austin looked at him and said, "You want no part in this," before stabbing Jeff in the head, neck, and back during their struggle. Jeff managed to disable him, escape, and call for help, and we know from the arrest warrant that Deputy Grace Zoff, fuck, I still didn't look up how to say that. It's spelled Zopf, so...
However you guys want to interpret that.
Zoff, whatever, it doesn't matter. Sorry, Grace. But anyways, she saw him sitting on top of John, biting him, right?
Yeah.
And she said that while John was begging for help, Austin yelled and said, "He told me to shoot him repeatedly. I did not have the opportunity to shoot him. I was seeing this man biting the chest of another man and hearing the sound of, flesh being ripped. It was just awful." And that's a quote from her.
It's crazy how, I'm not defending Austin at all, but obviously, he didn't have bad intentions. It's weird to say, but...
It's so weird. That's why I like
But obviously what he did was terrible, but, he didn't go into that with terrible intentions. He didn't want to do any of that.
Just wait till my next case.
He didn't want to, he felt bad, obviously. That's why they wanted him to shoot him or whatever.
Yeah.
And he thought that it was an evil essence that he was attacking, but... Right?
No, you just threw in the name of the podcast there.
Oh, shoot, I did.
Okay, now that has to be the name.
I didn't even realize that.
That's sick. Okay, it's meant to be, obviously, then.
Evil essence.
Side note, we'll probably put this little bit at the beginning or something.
Yeah.
But we're trying to come up with a name for this thing, and everything I think of sounds cringy to me, so...
We've just come up, evil essence.
That's what kind of we were thinking, and then Wyatt just used it organically, so here we are.
Organic banana.
There's an evil essence to Austin. He's wild in that one.
He saw evil essence.
So anyways, when the other deputy arrived, because remember there was 3 of them trying to get him off of John.
Yeah.
So he arrived, they tried the tasers. I think we went over all this before, but just a brief reminder because it's been a while. But anyways, some stuff that we didn't go over before when John, actually I'm not sure if we did, but after they got him off of John, Austin continued struggling and thrashing about, and he screamed out to the officers, help me, I ate bad things." And when a deputy asked him what he ate, he replied, "I ate humans."
Unsettling.
That's very unsettling. So another sergeant said that he asked Austin what kind of drugs he was on, and he said that he didn't use drugs, and the police could test him. And an EMT on scene, Kevin Moore, asked him if he had taken anything. He replied that he smoked some weed and drank some alcohol, but he was referring to the bleach he drank.
Okay.
So the sergeant also saw that Austin had large chunks of flesh in his teeth still.
Ugh.
So Austin continued to scream at the EMTs, telling them to kill him, he deserves to die. From the medical records at St. Mary's Medical Center, where Austin was taken for treatment, right after the attacks, when he arrived, he was still writhing around violently, making animalistic sounds and not making any sense.
Okay.
He had been handcuffed and he had to be sedated because he was losing his shit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the first injuries they noticed were the lacerations to his hands with his right thumb just hanging on by a thread.
Oh.
That's horrifying. Responding officers, EMTs, and hospital staff all thought that he had to be on a drug like bath salts or flocka due to his seemingly supernatural strength.
Yeah.
But as we know, his labs state that he was not on either of those drugs.
That's crazy.
I know, right? So Austin continued to be combative and aggressive towards the doctors and nurses. They discovered that he had a serious clot in his arm on top of the serious injuries to the muscle on his hands. And they also found that his esophagus and stomach had been inflamed and burnt from drinking what they realized was fucking bleach.
Yeah.
So at some time during all of this, right, because remember, when all this happened, it was after Austin stormed out from his dinner with his fucking dad and whoever. So, you know, at a certain point after he had stormed out, which was, I think it was around 9 o'clock. Yeah, around 9 o'clock. Finally, his mom becomes concerned, and the reports differ, but sometime between 10 o'clock and 11:40 in the evening, Mina called police to report her son missing after they couldn't find him. So
that was all in a short time frame.
Exactly. So I'm not sure when, but police were eventually able to identify him and connect him with this missing persons report. Mina had described him, his state of mind, and the switchblade that he would be carrying. That switchblade matched the one police found that was used to stab John, Michelle, and Jeff. So over the course of the next few weeks, the following happened. Austin's blood pressure dropped dramatically, which meant he needed immediate emergency intervention to save his life. He was now unable to breathe. He had to have an airway inserted and required blood transfusions. His liver and kidneys were failing to work properly, and he had blood clots in the brain. So,
wow.
Pretty bad. And he also had pneumonia. Because of the injuries to his throat, he was unable to swallow and had to have a feeding tube installed. And Wade Hariff told the Palm Beach Post on August 23rd that Austin's organs were failing and that he was in critical condition. At that point, they knew Austin had ingested some kind of chemical, but they hadn't determined it yet. So the next day, he told the Post that he knew it wasn't flocka or any other kind of drug-induced psychosis. He said that schizophrenia ran in their family. Law enforcement were kind of like, yeah, whatever, Wade, at this time, because he probably just sounded like any clueless dad who didn't know what their son was up to.
Yeah.
But it turned out he was correct about his son not being on flocka, and as I said earlier, Wade did admit that he knew his son did shrooms and possibly even narcotics in the weeks before the murders, so it does seem like he's being honest here.
Yeah.
After he had received emergency treatment and spent a month in hospital, Austin was sent from the medical center to a rehabilitation center from the 15th of September to October 3rd. And there he continued to heal, but he experienced many setbacks. He needed constant supervision due to an impairment in comprehension skills and issues with his memory. And Austin would experience headaches, double vision. He needed to have speech therapy as part of his treatment. Like, he was not unscathed either.
He was totally messed up, like, to the maximum.
Exactly. Like, it's actually kind of amazing that he didn't die.
Yeah.
But now that Austin was healed, charges would be brought against him on October 3rd. After he was discharged from hospital, he was brought immediately back into custody without bond. So ain't nobody bailing him out of jail.
Alright, good.
Yeah. In November of 2016, his lab results came back showing that he was virtually clean. And then in February of 2017, so the next year, 22 minutes of unedited footage from Austin's video interview with Dr. Phil was released to the public. So I watched that on YouTube. The interview was...
So after all the murdering, he did an interview with Dr. Phil?
Yes.
They allowed that to happen?
He did it from his hospital bed, and his dad is, like, in the room. Lawyers are in the room.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know Dr. Phil does stuff that serious. I thought he was kind of just more of like
I know
joking people and stuff like that.
Yeah, like people like my wife cheated on me and with a broom. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought it was that kind of stuff too, but no, actually. But anyways, yeah. So he did his interview with Dr. Phil from his hospital bed. It was very hard to say for me if he was genuinely upset about what he had done or just concerned for his own future. Because he did seem like upset, and he was crying a little bit, but I wasn't sure if it was like concern for his own self and not wanting to go to jail, or if it was feeling bad.
I wouldn't even want to talk about that on Dr. Phil. Like, I would refuse to. I'd be like, no, like I'm terrible. I don't want to even ever think of that again.
I bet. Well, the thing is, like, he did have to. It's hard to say. I bet you there was a lot of like his parents also pressuring him to say certain things. Like his dad was in the hospital room with him. But John's son, the person that was attacked, so John the Fourth or John Jr. I've been calling him. He said, quote, "Sure, he looked sad and disheveled, but he's not sad about what he did. He's sad about going to jail." Okay. So just to give you all sides here, Austin says he's upset about it. Family of the victims say, "I don't think so." So make your own conclusion. But a little later that year, in June of 2017, the state attorney office released Austin's jailhouse calls, and honestly, it does not make anybody look good, but especially not Austin's dad, Wade. No. So, let me just say here, this process went on for way too long. The poor grieving family had to be put through the ringer again and again with hearings and hearings. There was a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes legal bullshit that prevented it from going to trial sooner, and apparently a few attorneys... And apparently a few attorneys came and went for the prosecution, according to the victim's family testimony. In their opinion, this led to insufficient prosecution for the murder of their loved ones. So, yeah, jailhouse calls were released. I tried to find the transcripts, but I couldn't track them down. But I did find some of the info that was in the calls, and even some quotes. Okay. So WPTV News reported that in the calls, Austin talks about wanting people to know the truth. His dad pushes back and says the truth is pretty gruesome. And Wade also appears to blame Michelle and John. He said, quote, yeah, right? That is where I was like, lost my shit. So he said, quote, "I think the reason why is they had something to do with what happened. Not just you. They had something to do with what happened, right?" And then Wade continues, quote, "In other words, how it started, not necessarily your fault," end quote. I have to disagree with you, sir. The girl was just chilling in her garage.
Yeah, you know, Wade, you're trying to defend your son a little too late here. This sort of defense for your son should have been happening earlier on.
Yeah,
when he needed to get help and before he murdered people.
If you were worried about the reputation of the family, it would have been better to deal with that beforehand than now, but, you know,
Didn't Austin explain that they weren't doing anything wrong, the Michelle, and he just saw them as dark figures? And
he saw the lighted garage and he thought that was going to be safe, but then he saw Michelle and he was, you know, losing his shit, so he thought that she was like a witch. Yeah. That's what he said. So, you know, that's what he said, and I mean, imagine being the family member of Michelle and John hearing that. I would, like, want to punch him so bad. Yeah. Now, from the family testimonies, we learn a lot more about these calls. During Cindy Mishcon, so she's the one who basically, she's the attorney, I told you about her before, and she's Michelle's sister, obviously. She said that there were a number of things that made her stomach turn in those calls, but mostly the calls consisted of Wade and Mina telling Austin that he did nothing wrong and not to feel sorry. Cindy said it was particularly hard to hear Wade refer to Michelle and John as, quote, "those fucking people," with such venom and hatred in his voice. Like, as if it was their fault for just living their normal everyday life. Yeah. So, Cindy went on to reveal that Austin's dad apparently said he took the entire office out for drinks to celebrate when the FBI lab report came back saying there were no drugs in his son's system. So he went out to celebrate. And it's like, these people are grieving, sir, because of what your son did.
I don't know if anything about the situation deserves celebration.
I don't think so. Unless, like, Austin goes to jail forever, but...
Yeah.
So according to Cindy, again, during her testimony, Austin had a very comfy prison stay. He had his own personal shower and toilet, a privilege most prisoners are not afforded. He also got his own personal phone to use, which is why there are hundreds of hours of phone calls recorded, so double-edged sword for him. Apparently during these calls, Austin compared himself to a prisoner of war or a Holocaust survivor being held against his will. I don't think so.
No.
So his parents seem to be leading him to think that he was the victim in all of this, according to Cindy, like as if they were kind of coaxing him into what he should feel. So Cindy is also a truly awesome woman. She had been I can't say that word apparently. She had also been an attorney in Florida for 30 years at the time of her testimony, so she knew her shit.
Yeah.
In fact, although denied the opportunity to prosecute Austin herself, she did her own investigation into things, and she spent hundreds of hours analyzing these calls, reading through Austin's messages, reviewing the evidence and laws regarding to the insanity defense.
Okay.
So, Cindy's a single mom, and she's working full fucking time at this point, and she still went hard for her sister. She fought so hard for justice, just like many of the other family members did. Michelle's other sister, Jody Bruce, in her testimony, she also talks about the jailhouse calls. I was so Canadian there. Jailhouse calls.
The jailhouse calls.
We're leaving that in.
We're Canadian.
It's fine. So, anyways, she reads from her written statement that Austin wanted, quote, to know who's responsible for this solitary confinement crap. And she said that Austin claimed about the crap they were putting him through. He apparently also remarked, quote, I'm gonna be here another year and a half? That's what I'm pissed about.
It should be longer than a year and a half.
Oh, it was. And Jody talks about that too. She's like, I bet you were real pissed when it turned out to be this many years.
What? Life. That's, what it should be, but...
Well, we'll see. Jody then talks about some of the things that Wade said in those calls. So Wade, according to Jody, referred to the situation as, quote, just a 2-year blip, then we'll get past it. We'll get through this bullshit.
That's...
It's not exactly that. It's kind of like murdering 2 people? I don't know.
Out of everybody, I hate Wade the most.
That's what I felt too.
It's honestly his fault almost more than it even is Austin's fault.
And the stuff, he said other stuff too. I think I wrote it down here. But he said other stuff too, he was being racist as fuck, he was talking shit about his Jewish co-workers, things like that, not just all bad things that you could think of. And I'm like, okay, you seem like a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the victim's family were in support of the death penalty for Austin, especially John and Michelle's kids, John and Ivy. But in August of 2017, the prosecution announced they would not seek the death penalty. The families of Michelle and John got no heads up on this information. They just found out on the news.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, fucked up. So later that year in December, Austin's lawyers, Nellie King and Robert Watson, filed a notice of intent to use the insanity defense during the first-degree murder trial. In the summer of the next year, 2018, so it's already fucking almost 2 years since the murder and nothing is really happening.
Yeah.
So Michelle's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Austin. I think they were starting to lose faith that Michelle and John would get proper justice at this point. And with the decision to not seek the death penalty, and the defense's intention to seek a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, they probably felt quite concerned. So Michelle's sister Jody said about this decision to file the suit, quote, we want justice for Michelle and John. Austin will pay for what he has done. If not with his life, then with the only thing we can get from him, which is a civil judgment.
Where are the Avengers when you need them?
They can't some fucking ass.
They can't save the world in their own words, but they can. You can be damn sure they'll avenge it. Where's somebody to go and avenge? Just somebody needs to just murder this Austin guy. Okay, maybe not, but
I get it though. You get angry.
Yeah.
I mean, the family wanted the death penalty, so, I mean, obviously you're not encouraging murder or harming anybody, but, like, the feeling is real. Like, it's rough. On February 6th of 2019, Judge Sherwood Bauer scheduled a trial date of November 4th. March 28th of 2019, so, like, 2 months later, is when the forensic psychologist, Dr. Philip Resnick, released his 38-page report and why he concluded Austin was insane at the time of the murders. And I do have to say, after studying the entire thing, I did agree with him.
I mean, yeah, he was insane.
It's kind of hard to say he wasn't.
He was completely insane at the time of the murders.
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing is, because when it comes to legal cases like this, being insane in the law's eyes and being actually insane are different.
Yeah.
So being insane by reason of, being not guilty by reason of insanity means that you didn't understand what you were doing at the time, and you didn't understand the consequences of your actions, basically. Like, you were gone.
It's kind of crazy to see, because whenever we think of somebody that's insane, we just see the final result of them being insane, but in this we got to see the build-up to what led just a regular boy to being insane.
Exactly. That's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast, because I'm so intrigued by these things. I'm like, you were just like a normal college boy. You played football. What happened? I mean, I guess drugs happened, but like...
Yeah.
So don't do drugs, people. My God.
No drugs.
No drugs. Maybe some weed, but that's
nope,
it.
Not even that.
Wow, I'm still gonna do it.
You'll be lazy then.
Yeah, I can confirm that. So yeah, I do agree that he was insane at the time. So Austin was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder, acute manic episodes with psychotic features. It seems like there were delays coming from both sides for the rest of 2019. So in June, the defense filed a motion in support of their insanity defense. In August, the prosecution asked to be allowed to record a psychological evaluation of Austin. The judge also canceled a September status check without setting a new date for it. And apparently, the trial was rescheduled for May 18th of 2020.
Oh, that's when I was turning 16?
Yeah.
I think.
It's interesting to think of what you're doing on that day. So in early March of 2020, so remember this incident happened in 2016. It's almost 4 years now. The judge delayed the trial yet again after the prosecution asked to hire a second mental health expert to evaluate the now 23-year-old Austin.
Oh, so he's getting old now.
Yeah, because I mean he's getting older. Girl, I'm 25, almost 26.
Oh man.
So it was at this point that the state hired a psychologist, Dr. Landrum, who also concluded that Austin was suffering from an acute psychotic episode at the time of the crime and was therefore criminally insane. So the defense and prosecution had a bit of back and forth during this time. Prosecution claimed they wanted a second expert to be able to examine Austin and that this was going to be different from the other doctor who was hired. Because this expert was a neuropsychologist and Dr. Landrum was not. So the defense claimed that the prosecution only wanted to hire another expert because they didn't like the results they got from the first one. And Judge Bauer ordered both sides to submit written legal briefs on the issue, which were to be handed in by March 13th. So I kind of get what the defense is saying with this one, because they've already had two psychologists review him from both sides. One paid by the defense, one paid by the prosecution, and both concluded he's insane. So, like, really? Like, do we need to do this again? Like, this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, we get it.
And you also have to think of Austin's side of things, like, because in legal, like, he's obviously guilty in this one, in some manner.
Yeah.
But what if he wasn't? What if it was a situation where you don't know if they're guilty? He's been sitting in jail for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's a lawsuit if he wasn't guilty.
Yeah, definitely.
But in this situation, it's pretty fucking cut and dry. It's just, what is he going to be charged with?
Well, he's guilty, but...
Is he guilty of first-degree murder, like intentionally murdering, or is he guilty of...
It's definitely tough to say, like...
Exactly.
Gotta go, like, based off of his mind. Like, he what he was thinking, and that's impossible to know. He's the only one that knows.
And the other thing, so I wouldn't have any problem with not guilty by reason of insanity if they had some kind of amount of time they need to be put away, because as soon as someone's found not guilty by reason of insanity, they basically are like, okay, you're going to the hospital until they say you're fine.
Yeah.
Could be 2 years, could be 20.
That's might be never for Austin.
Yeah. Or it could be tomorrow. You never fucking know.
With the way his
That's
his
what's
moods,
concerning.
with the way his moods change, yeah, I don't know.
You never know with that one. But anyways, yeah, things were delayed after that because also in 2020, you know, COVID occurred, so that fucked everything up. But things seemed to heat back up in September of 2021. As per Judge Bauer's earlier ruling, neuropsychologist Michael Gamache was... Oh, I hope I said that right.
Michael Gamache?
Gamache.
It's gotta be... Oh.
Gamache.
What if it's Michael Gamish?
A neuropsychologist named Michael was hired by the state to determine if Austin was insane or not. He conducted his interview with Austin over Zoom on September 8th, and he concluded that Austin was not insane during the murders.
Oh, now we got a different one.
Now we've got a third one. So the defense took issue with the fact that he did not issue a written report like the two other doctors had. The defense also alleged that they witnessed this interview and it was more of a cross-examination and not a psychological examination. So the prosecution asked to set a trial date for sometime in March or April of 2022.
Holy shit, this is getting right to present day.
For real. So Judge Bauer said he'd get back to them about that. It looks like finally, after almost a year had gone by, Judge Bauer set a new trial for November 28th of 2022, and that would finally be the date that stuck.
Okay.
So.
We don't even know at this point. It's so close to the present time. Maybe it's not the date that stuck. Maybe they'll bring up a new one.
No, it is, though. So we have to take a second here to think about the family. I mean, they waited 6 years for this in the end. Constantly being strung along when they were already grieving. But for these families, things were only about to get worse. On November 28th of 2022, the prosecution and defense agreed upon a plea deal, which the judge accepted. Instead of going forward with the trial, Austin would be found not guilty by reason of insanity without any trial.
Oh my goodness. I would be... I mean, that's such a tough one. You gotta... You can't be mad with the judges, because that's such a hard job for them, like...
I watched the trial too, and he did say, because as we go further, I'm going to tell you the victim impact statements, but he did say, because the sisters and Michelle begged him to not allow this, but he said the prosecution and the defense have agreed, my hands are tied, I can't really do anything here.
Yeah.
They've both agreed. And it's kind of fucked up to me that the prosecution didn't speak with the family first, because that's what you're supposed to do, I feel, just morally. Yeah. What do you want to see happen here for your loved one?
Yeah. I mean, there's still got to be, I guess he's been in jail for a while, but there's got to be further consequences still. They got to do something.
There needs to be a trial. That's what I think. So, not guilty by reason of insanity, you're still going to be going to a mental hospital.
Yeah.
But for how long? He could be out next year.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know.
They gotta...
And he could go and murder someone else.
Yeah, that's the thing. They gotta make sure that... I think this guy's permanently messed up. There's no... sure, he can get better, but he's permanently messed up. I mean,
he could live a decent, peaceful life, but I don't want him out on the streets.
Yeah, that's somebody that... not to say that he shouldn't still maybe... as he gets older, get, a nice place to stay, but he should constantly be, he should never get the chance to live on his own again in his own house without people monitoring him 24/7,
I can't help but feel for the family, because Michelle and John don't get to do that. They don't get anywhere to stay at all. They're dead.
Well, hopefully heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
yeah.
I mean...
But still.
Personally, this is just me, but if I found out that this guy was getting let loose, I would, if I was, if that was my parents, I would find this guy's address and I would just, that's it. I don't care. I'm going to jail for the rest of my life.
Like, really? You want to beat up a 100-pound female and a almost 60-year-old man?
Like, that would be it. I would plan to go to this guy's house, and that would be the last that he sees anything.
Oh, don't worry. My favorite part of this is coming up when we hear what John's son said.
Oh, okay.
It's good, because he gave them all of the things that I wanted to hear said to him. So, when the Stevens and Mishcon families heard about this, they were devastated. When Michelle's sister Jody found out that the state had agreed to have a judge find Austin not guilty by reason of insanity, she felt they had totally given up on justice for her sister and brother-in-law. So this is where things kind of leave off in the story. There hasn't been much news since the verdict. The families promised to pursue whatever legal action they could possibly to change the verdict. Maybe there will be more news in the future, but for now, let's get into the victim impact statements. Now, much of the information I have already told you is from these statements, so I'm not going to repeat all that stuff, and I'm just going to say the rest of what the families had to say. I have to say that I don't know exactly how I feel about Austin at the end of all this, but the people whose perspectives really matter are the ones who lost their loved ones, and I support them 100%.
Yeah, that's the thing. If, like, it's hard from just us over here in Canada trying to form an opinion on this, but if that was my parents that happened to, I would have no mercy whatsoever for Austin. I don't care what he's been through. If you murder my family, that's, like, no forgiveness or anything there.
Yeah. So. And they have every right to feel that way. So the victim impact statements were all very powerful, especially the immediate family members. So on August 28th, 2022, like I said, after 6 years of back and forth, the family finally got to speak. First, it was Michelle's sister, Cindy. Most of her testimony has already been discussed, but one thing I don't think I mentioned is Austin's interest in becoming famous. In the couple of weeks before the murders, according to Cindy, Austin had searched up something along the lines of how to get famous with no talent. And Cindy also said that the article he found, which they were able to see that he clicked on with his phone, had murder high on that list to get famous with no talent. So that, I get why the family's like, I don't know, was this intentional? You know. Other than that, Cindy said she had a victim impact statement typed up, but when she found out there was not even going to be a trial, she deleted the whole fucking thing, and she just went on a mission to prove Austin was a deranged drug addict, and that's how she saw him. At the end of her statement, Cindy did read aloud a statement from her daughter, so Michelle's niece. Cindy's daughter, Perry, had followed in her mother's footsteps later on in life. She was only just starting the 7th grade when Michelle and John were killed, which we did mention before. So Perry went on to say that 1/3 of her life was spent planning for justice for her late aunts and uncle. She knew her mother to stay up all hours of the night conducting her own investigation into what happened to ensure this killer would never do it again. But when Cindy thought that Perry had gone to sleep, she would cry softly in her room. Kids are fucking smart, they know. But, I mean, what a great mother trying to shield her baby from this.
Yeah.
So Perry is awesome, and like I said before, this all inspired her to become an attorney herself. And the statement Cindy read aloud was actually Perry's essay for when she was trying to get into uni to do that. So after this, Jody Bruce, Michelle's other sister, spoke. Because remember, Michelle has 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
Yeah.
So this is her other sister, and she talked about her disappointment in the system. She couldn't understand how someone could murder 2 people and not even stand trial. She had been driving over 5 hours for every hearing over the past 6 years, and during COVID, she was always there on the Zoom calls. Jody made sure to send Austin pictures of the family in the mail, and apparently Austin didn't even know who they were. He was like, who are these people? It's like, so in the courtroom...
Like the people he murdered?
Yeah, Michelle and John.
That kind of in a way proves the point that he was insane, though, because if he doesn't know who those people are...
So she showed pictures in the courtroom, and she, like, pointed out, it was very sad to watch, actually, and she told Austin, she was like, look, don't put your head down, look up. She was like, this is my sister, you killed her. She went on to say that Michelle and John's garage was open that night because they were lovely people who loved to entertain neighbors, friends, family, anyone in the community. They honestly probably would have, if Austin was being normal, they probably would have been like, hey, like, are you okay? Can we help you out? I honestly think that's what they would have done.
Yeah.
But one of the pictures that Jody showed included their dad, Jeff, and she told Austin that Jeff, because remember Jeff, good old Mayor Jeff from Florida?
Oh, yeah.
Her dad. So he couldn't be there in person because she said, quote, "You basically killed him when you killed my sister."
Oh.
So Jeff has been in poor health and depressed ever since. He has not bounced back in 6 years. I truly do hope he's doing better now, although I don't know how you could. That's your daughter. Like,
yeah.
And he lost his wife, too, when she was only 53, the same fucking age.
Yeah, man, he's had the worst of it all, holy.
This poor guy, yeah. So next, Michelle's brother Mason spoke, and I love the name Mason. So I know it's a cool name.
Mason, yeah.
A common theme among the impact statements was calling Wade Harif for his language, or calling Wade Harif out for his language about Michelle and John. Mason also condemned Wade for saying about his son's victims, quote, "He didn't even know those fucking people." I can't get over that. Like, how do you even say that about somebody?
Yeah.
But Mason said that literally no one cares about his poor 100-pound sister and brother-in-law were brutally stabbed and beaten by this fucker. They all just wanted to get this whole legal situation figured out and move on. Mason also shamed the prosecution, but my favorite part of his statement is when he calls Wade a first-class scumbag.
Nice.
Like, alright, you said it. I didn't say it, but you said it. Mason also implored Austin to do to himself what he had done to Mason's sister and brother-in-law, and then he would have his forgiveness. He was like, just scalp yourself and bash yourself on the floor and bite your own self, and then you'll have my forgiveness.
Honestly, I mean, maybe somebody will do that to him. It's not my place, but maybe one
I'm
of his
not
family.
saying that to do that, but things happen. So then, Michelle's sister-in-law wrote, I don't know how to pronounce this, Rocio? I'm gonna go with Rocio. It's Spanish, I believe. She's married to Mason. I think she sat down with him anyways after in the trial, like they were sitting together and comforting each other. She's an immigrant, presumably from South or Central America, based on her accent. It's not really important. The only reason I say that is because she says in her statement that she used to think America was the greatest country and that's why she wanted to come there. But now she said she knows she's wrong. She lamented about how almost 3 people were killed because Jeff was pretty fucking close.
Yeah.
The perpetrator was caught in the act, yet still no trial. So Rocio thought that through this whole legal situation, she has learned that it's okay to go and get high and kill people as long as daddy and mommy pay for good attorneys. But then it was time for John and Michelle's children to speak, and these are the real, intense ones. So I know that Michelle is their stepmom, but honestly, we don't really need to make that distinction here. Michelle was a mom to these kids, even though they had a whole other mom. So we'll start with Ivy's harrowing statement. Ivy said that for the last 3 years before August 15th, it was like clockwork. Every single night, the neighbors would gather, hang out, have drinks, same people. Ivy wondered out loud how Michelle felt in those last moments. She wondered how much pain and horror Michelle had to endure before she fell unconscious for the last time. And when she thinks about her dad, she thinks about how he felt, using his dying words to call out for help, while Austin continued attacking him without a thought. And Ivy said, quote, "You are the reason I no longer have a father and a second mom. You are the reason why my 2 beautiful boys will never have grandparents," end quote. Ivy then turned to Austin's parents, and this is where shit gets good. She wondered if they were neglectful or just stupid. She literally said that. And she asked Mina why the hell she would let her son leave the house that night if he was acting so strange. Now, Austin's father had 2 chances to follow his son out of that restaurant and talk to him. Maybe take time to get help, which was obviously needed at this point. Wade even said himself that his son needed to be fucking hospitalized. So he knew his son's state of mind, but instead, Ivy says, Wade did nothing. He stayed back at the restaurant so he could finish his meal with his girlfriend. Oh, and she says, actually, he did do something. He violently grabbed his son by the shirt in front of everyone in that restaurant, and his son cocked his fist back as if to hit him, but stopped. Ivy then said to Wade in the courtroom, quote, did you ever wonder what would have happened if Austin had made it back to your house that night rather than my father's? Do you wonder if the bloodshed he released on my dad and Michelle was meant for you? Yeah. End quote.
Good.
So Ivy finished her statement wishing Austin suffers every day like her parents did that night. She wished for him the worst in life, called him and she called him a disgusting human with a rancid soul, and said he's a sick animal who should have been put down. After she finished her written statement, she looked at Austin and his family and said, I hope you burn in hell along with your parents. And then she left the stand.
That was a good one.
It's a bad bitch thing to say. Now, John the Fourth is my favorite. So he couldn't be there because, as we know, he had moved to Kansas many years earlier, and he now had a wife and 2 kids. Another reason he couldn't be there, he had adopted John and Michelle's dog, Rebel, if you remember from the beginning. But now, after all these years, Rebel was 13, and he was suffering, or he or she was suffering from cancer. So John had been carrying Rebel up and down the stairs for weeks at this point. The dog could not even go up and down the stairs because of how sick it was. Yeah. So the hardest thing for him was explaining this to his children. When he told Jameson, she remarked, quote, this is how we remember Grandpa too. And that's so sad.
Yeah.
She was just a little baby. But anyway, John was and is a badass, and he was an Iraq war vet. So in his statement over Zoom, he thanked his dad for making him who he was today. If him being a vet wasn't enough, he was also a college graduate, a father, and now an executive. So John said that he was very disappointed that the deputies didn't shoot Austin on sight. He said he knows what it's like to pull the trigger on someone, how difficult it is, and that he still thinks these deputies were pathetic.
Yeah.
So then John had some choice words for Austin. He addressed Austin directly by saying, quote, the next time you want to have a little power trip like this, instead of murdering a 100-pound female and almost 60-year-old man, do this to someone who can defend themselves. Come find me. And then he paused and said, you fucking pussy.
Yeah, do it. That won't go over so well that time. The second time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying before. He was like, yeah, come find me, Austin. I'm a fucking veteran. I can fuck you up.
I don't think Austin should find him.
I don't think so, girl.
Should be the other way around.
I get that. But also John has a family and stuff, and he can't really go to jail for that. He probably would go to jail. But yeah, you just know that John would fucking rip him to pieces. And he, like most other family members, encouraged Austin to kill himself. And I don't think anyone has any right to tell this family how to feel. They have every right to express these feelings, and I probably would feel the same way if this happened to my family member. So,
yeah.
Especially after being informed that there would be no trial and no real justice. Next to speak after John was a family member named Haley, or a family friend named Haley. So, she was living with Cindy Mishcon and her daughter Perry at the point in 2022 when this trial was happening, or not trial. But Haley spoke about how she had been in college at the same exact time as Austin and also struggled with drug addiction. It was a low point for her, and, we've all been in a bad place in our lives.
Yeah.
But unlike Austin, Haley said she never, ever dreamed of harming anybody else other than herself, even though she was going through a similar experience.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, many people have become addicted to drugs and struggled with their mental health. Hello, I've been there myself.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's been lots of people who have, many people, and it's just struggles within themselves. They don't ever have intentions to murder people. And didn't Austin say earlier on, too, that he's like a murderer, or he wants to be, or something like that?
Yes, exactly. So, he texted his friend saying, I'm a serial killer, and, I see dead bodies. Mm-hmm. So, who knows? I mean, that was during his drug use also, so who the fuck knows?
Yeah, I guess.
But still, Haley also finished her thing up and said, you should kill yourself. That's basically how they all finished it. They're like, yeah, you suck, da-da-da, kill yourself, bye. So to complete the victim impact statements, Michelle's ex-husband, Rich, if you remember, she had a husband before, so did John also had a wife before.
Yeah.
But Rich spoke very briefly. They were still really good friends at the time of her death. And Rich was a prosecutor in Florida when he met Michelle, so a lot of fucking smart people in this whole family. But he also took his job very seriously. And he knew his prosecutor co-workers to be almost too determined to get justice for victims, many times taking the cases home with them, like, just, you know, not leaving it at work, but having it in your brain all the time.
Yeah.
But he said watching this legal proceeding made him lose a lot of faith. And he thought all prosecutors would work hard for justice, but he said these ones did not. And then to wrap up the whole thing, Jody went back up to speak, so Michelle's sister, and she begged the judge not to accept the insanity plea and to instead hold a trial. But she made it known that she and her family would be studying the legal system in order to find a way to appeal this decision. After Jody sat back down, the statements concluded, and the judge got the chance to speak. So Judge Bauer basically told the family he couldn't help them, unfortunately. If the prosecution and defense agree, he couldn't stop it. So he did defend the prosecutors, saying he thinks they did their best, and this was a genuine case of insanity. In response to the many accusations against Austin's parents that they simply paid his way out of this, Judge Bauer pointed out that he presided over many cases where they had a successful insanity defense, and it was like a state-appointed lawyer, like somebody who could not afford a lawyer themselves.
Yeah.
So it does happen. But here is where we conclude the case. We still have 2 more things to go over. Number 1 is our thoughts. So we put the families first because their opinions are what matters.
Yeah.
But this wouldn't really be a true crime podcast if we didn't try to understand what the fuck happened here. So the following is all just our opinions, allegedly, all that stuff, you know. I mean, no one's really listening right now anyways, but,
no,
you know, we should say it. So I put a little bit of my opinion.
Okay.
We don't know what happened here exactly, like nobody does. But in my opinion, I think Austin most likely was insane at the time of the crime. Now, this doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve life in prison. I think he definitely should not be released to wreak more havoc on society.
No.
I personally think the family of the victims should have a great influence over the sentencing. They're the ones that were hurt. So if they want life imprisonment, I agree. I'm not sure if I would agree with the death penalty in this case, because, like, man, he really was insane, I think.
Yeah.
But I didn't lose my loved ones, so, like, who am I to say?
Yeah.
But the fact that 2 separate doctors, one for the defense and one for the prosecution, found Austin to be insane at the time leads me to believe he was. So now, was this insanity brought on by his drug use? That's my big question, because I'm no expert.
Yeah.
But that level of drug use at the age of 18 and 19, that will do some shit to your brain.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, if the insanity was developed because of the drug use, I think they got to look into that a little bit too, because at that point, like, sure, he was insane, but, well, was it because his own fault? Because he was taking the drugs and everything? Like...
Right. Like, if you take drugs directly before murdering someone, does that mean it's fine and you're just going to get insanity because you were temporarily insane? Like, that doesn't set a great precedent.
And I know he was already messed up on the drugs, but he seemingly had intentions to possibly murder somebody a little bit throughout the story, like with telling his friends that he's a serial killer and stuff like that. So you can just maybe, who knows, how do we know that he didn't have those plans and he was just like, maybe I have plans to murder someone. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the drugs and then I'm deemed insane and now I can go do it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, like the family said, he could have literally, I mean, in my opinion, it would be a lot of work in order to completely plan this all out. Like, if he was, like, lucid and aware during his, like, whatever he was doing, that's pretty wild how far in advance he planned this all.
Yeah.
But it's possible. We don't know. We weren't in his brain.
Yeah, I don't think he planned it all out, but...
I don't really
I think so. Regular Austin, before any of the drugs and anything, would never have thought about or planned to murder anybody, but...
He is famous now.
Yeah.
And we're talking about him.
But at the same time, like, I mean, he was insane because of what he did to himself with all the drugs and all that stuff. So a certain amount of that, even though he didn't maybe mean to do what he did, a certain amount of that is his fault, like 100%. Because
some of that's on you.
So yeah, I don't know if I agree with.
I think he should have gone to jail for at least, like, I think he should have gotten a murder charge.
And even out of jail, like, I don't think he's ever coming back from that mentally. Like, he's totally messed up for the rest of his life.
And
all the drugs and everything.
Fucking doubt that Wade and Mina are gonna take care of him.
Yeah,
they did real good last time.
Yeah, he's not somebody that can just go and live on his own ever again, I don't think, because who knows that, how do we know that he's not gonna
even if he
snap one day?
Like, even if he seems to be fully recovered, we don't know.
Yeah, how do you know he's not just gonna, like...
We know what he's capable of.
Yeah. Like, it's happened before.
What if he gets into another manic episode?
Yeah, exactly. You never know when those things are just going to happen. They've happened to him before, so it's something that's been unlocked in his brain. It's forever going to be something that can possibly happen, I think.
Exactly.
What went on in his brain at that moment. It's something that's been unlocked in his brain. He's experienced it now, so...
And I mean, the thing is, so... I'm obviously not a doctor or an expert, but when it comes to, like... people who have mental illness, especially like schizophrenia, you're told not to smoke weed, not to do drugs like that, because it will bring that out in you. If you have like a family history of schizophrenia, don't do those things.
Yeah. So, yeah. What if one night he's having a hard night and he's like, I'm gonna have a drink, let's smoke some weed, and then that initiates it, like.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't do it that fast, but like the way he was doing it over years and years, like, sir. But anyways, I mean, I don't think, and I think we both agree that he never, like, intended for this to happen. That's my opinion. Again, we don't know.
But
it's
again,
possible.
If you were born completely insane, like, then you have no say in that. Like, that's not your fault if you went and murdered somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But he had something to do with the fact that he was insane, so
yeah,
like
it's really tough. It's just, I think at the end of the day, no matter what the fuck happened here, what we think about it, he should be kept from society.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He's a danger. Like,
this would be easier to make a decision if I was the actual family, because
I know
that's like, yeah, that's.
But now I want to leave you with like a little, memory of John and Michelle. Because they were loving, welcoming, trustworthy, friendly people, and they had a lot of wisdom to offer. You can see this in the way that the family and friends talked about them, and you can also see this in the way that Ivy and John turned out. Successful, loving, kind people, just like their parents. Both have become parents, and great parents at that. And the impact of the murder has far-reaching consequences. But also, out of the ashes, the family pulled together to fight for justice. Perry was inspired to pursue law as her career. The entire family hugs each other a little tighter than ever before. And Michelle and John just sound like two of the most lovely people that anybody would want to know. And they remind me of, like, my family and my friends. So after their deaths, Michelle's sister found a box that Michelle and John had saved, and this is really sweet. This box contained 24 years worth of love letters, birthday and Christmas cards they had sent each other, and other like sentimental little gifts they had given each other. It was like their love box, and I'm like, oh, so sweet.
Yeah.
But these two were truly meant for each other. Like, they just wanted to go on their boat, go fishing, host family, enjoy their retirement, and John was so excited to meet his baby granddaughter, and Michelle was ready to give all her love and attention to this little baby. But those poor grandbabies will never get the pleasure to know Michelle and John. John Jr. said about his dad, quote, "He was patient. He wasn't someone who was judgmental or intense in the way he raised me. That's the way I'll raise my daughter, and to appreciate the small things in life, like nature. He thought Florida was the best place in the world and couldn't understand why anyone wouldn't want to live there." End quote. So according to one article, John said he bought his father John's boat after his death, and he now takes his daughter out on the boat just like his father wished he could have.
Oh, that's good.
Right. So, Some of these quotes may be repeated, but I want to remind you of the wonderful people that Michelle and John were, so we can end off with that. So Ivy said about Michelle, quote, "She was truly my best friend. She was my parent. She was my advice giver, my financial advisor, and my confidant." Ivy said about John that he was, quote, "the true epitome of what you would think a retired Florida fisherman would be." And she also said that he was the most hilarious She also said he was the most hilarious person she'd ever known. And if you get the chance, I recommend you take a look at Michelle's Facebook page. It is a public memorial and hosts tons of photos of the two of them and the family. And these photos and videos say more than words ever could. I saw one video where John and someone else, they were doing the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. And I believe that Michelle was the one taking the video because she was the one to post it. And just like hearing their voices, seeing them smiling and enjoying life out on the boat, it's just so sad that they can't do that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
These people built just a beautiful life together, and I would have loved to know them, but unfortunately we will never get the chance to know them. And no matter what you think about this case, we will never get to meet them because of Austin Harif. And that is the end of part 2 of the Michelle Mishcon Stevens and John Stevens case. So thank you again so much for listening, and rest in peace to Michelle and John, and our hearts go out to the family. What they've gone through is unimaginable, as you've heard if you've listened to this whole thing through. So again, thank you very much. Hope you have a great rest of your week.